I'm an explorer and a guide. I started my career in the gold mines in Africa, in an old working gold mine, tour guiding, taking people through the mine. Fast forward, and I became a game ranger, wearing a khaki uniform, showing people fierce animals by day in waterholes, and at night time, little tiny creatures by torchlight. I grew up really nomadic. I spent some time with a Zulu king and his 5 wives. I even at some stage lived in Soweto, the biggest township just outside of Johannesburg, long before white people used to tread there. And then with a Maasai warrior in Kenya, before I've hit sunny Perth in Western Australia. I'm a human behaviourist that likes to discover new places, new communities, and learn more about them and then connect them. Because in the end, it really comes down to community. When my husband and I moved here to Australia, we first did what we call our LSD trip, our look, see and decide. And we stayed everywhere for about a week just to explore all the different nuances that Australia had to offer. Until we hit Perth. Perth has sucked us in like a black hole. We just loved it here. Maybe it was a similarity. It's kind of a similar latitude. The weather patterns are similar. Maybe even the people. Or is it that similar? I came from a continent scattered with white thorn acacia trees to one with tall eucalyptus everywhere. So what do you see when you look at this picture? What does it represent for you? Maybe a nice blue sky, some tranquility. Maybe you immediately spotted it and recognized it as a blue gum or a eucalyptus tree. What if you were all a room full of koalas, assuming you've stayed awake because they do sleep about 22 hours a day? Maybe then you would have said food. What if you were an Indigenous medicine woman, a healer? Maybe then you would have said medicine, because we know the eucalyptus leaves are good for so many things. Perspective is important. Do you know when the first Europeans came out here to Australia and landed here in Western Australia, they came across an Indigenous mob and they were at a traditional smoking ceremony and they had a young baby and they were holding the baby over the eucalyptus smoke. The Europeans rushed back to Europe to go and report that there's a bunch of cannibals living here who's probably cooking their children. Perspective is really important. Now, you can't really travel for more than probably 10 kilometres in Australia without coming across one of these eucalyptus trees. My first real memory and getting to know eucalyptus trees was where my story started, in these gold mines. They use the eucalyptus trees to hoist itself to the top. It makes it really strong when you put pressure from the top on the tree. So they use the eucalyptus trees to hold up the mine shafts. It's also a really fast-growing tree, so you could replace them really quickly. They also do like water. And it didn't take long before South Africa, in the about 60 years after, started declaring them a weed, a destructive species, because they drink about 16% of the water needed per year. And they wanted to eradicate them, get rid of them. Now, at the end of apartheid in 1994 in South Africa, these trees became really symbolic of this melting pot of nationalism. On the one hand, you had these trees that held up mine shafts that represented freedom for people who could take out gold from under the ground. And on the other side, you had white settlement. The powers to be suddenly all got together in stuffy rooms to start discussing how can they eradicate this plant, get rid of this invasive species. But what they were really discussing was truth and reconciliation. Apartheid on one end and freedom on the other side. I have a friend who lives in Melbourne, and at the height of the pandemic, when they were in the 15-week lockdown, we had a bit of a chat at some stage, and he's an enthusiastic health fanatic. And he kept up his exercise routine to 1.5 hours every single day. But early on in the conversation, he expressed to me how he was missing trees, how they represented freedom to him, because he suddenly was stuck in his suburb. He couldn't get out from where he was. He couldn't go and sit and have a picnic under a tree. And we discussed how one day there will be planes in the sky again, and he will come and visit, and we'll spend Christmas or birthdays together, and it represented hope for us. That hope, however, could also be an acronym for hope, but also opportunities and possibilities that are just absolutely endless. But talking about freedom made me reflect and wonder, are we really all equally free? We know that during the pandemic, marginalized communities were affected much more. Let's just for a moment pause and look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs as a tree. I have to point out that this here is an American tree, and this is important to keep in mind. And the reason this is an American tree is because Maslow stems from Brooklyn in New York. And leadership is often applied universally, but it's not. It should really be applied within a particular cultural context. Now, Maslow said that right at the top of this tree, once all of these bottom needs has been filled, should self-actualization sits at the top. But many academics argue that this is maybe not quite true. At least this may be true for Western cultures, but Eastern culture should probably rather be a sense of community. And if you just think of closer to home of our indigenous mob yarning under a tree, surely for them that sense of community is rather at the utmost top of their tree of life. This same tree also, of course, if you look right from the bottom up, can provide us with shelter and medicine, a place to hide from a storm, a place to catch up with friends, and ultimately really provide, again, that sense of community. Who have you yarned with under a tree lately? I want you to think for a moment, just go back and think when you had your last barbecue. Who did you have over? Was it people that was just like you? People with a similar educational background, a similar sexual orientation? Maybe they voted for the same political party? Was it a bunch of people with random, different perspectives? It's only when we expose ourselves to these different perspectives that we could really get to know them, get to understand them. So I want to encourage you to reach out to somebody on the other side of this room today, someone on the other side of your office building on a different floor, someone that's different from you, someone that you would normally not have lunch with. Go and ask them their story. Learn about their perspective. And just be open to listening without judgment. The virus still on our minds, and it has certainly affected the way that we work, that we live, that we play. But it hasn't affected us all equally. I'm a guide and I'm an explorer, but I'm also a woman, and I'm a mother, and I'm a wife. And people like me and people like you have disproportionately been affected. Women, for example, has lost many more hours compared to men during the virus. Our working hours have gone down considerably comparatively as well. I would even argue that the government incentives that got handed out were very much towards male incentive industries, male-driven industries, like, for example, the construction industry. People of colour were also affected, right at the time where they had a universal platform to try and make a difference, to change. Our intergenerational inequality has been coming through for the last decade already, with young people earning less and less. Unless we change the way that we do things, we face the risk of turning back the clocks, of going back in time. I remember in March this year, I came back from a business trip and I was picked up at the airport by my Uber driver. And he stopped, and as I got in, he sighed with relief, and we started a conversation with me trying to explore why is he so relieved. And he immediately explained, enthusiastically and animated, that he has just driven past 3 Chinese clients and he's cancelled their ride because obviously we couldn't pick up Chinese people in a time like this. I was saddened by the racism in that. The next wave will be the mental health wave. We've already seen statistics around this, and we already know that many people has been affected by the stress. The human impact of this is going to be enormous, and it's your job and my job to reach out to our community and to give a helping hand. This fear that we have experienced has changed the makeup of our psychology. And when we fear, when we're scared, our systems start shutting down and we increase our biases. We become more conformist and become less open to the stories and the opinions of other people. Those same opinions is like white noise. They're all around us and everybody has one. But that white noise, it washes down into our systems, into our souls, and it causes generational trauma. Generational trauma that we pass on through our genes to our children and our children's children. That's why it's so important to reach out. I am an explorer, an ex-game ranger. But like with all professions, you can't just go out there and the magic will happen. You need to spot some patterns. You can maybe go out to a water hole and wait for the animals to arrive. In the same way that we can use these patterns of animal behavior, we can read human behavior and we can reach out to others. We can reach out to those that's different from us. Get to know their story without judgment, without judging them for their skin color or their looks up front, and already deciding before the conversation started that maybe I just won't talk to that person. Go out and go and find the common ground. Go out and explore. I'm definitely still an explorer. I'm no longer living with a Maasai warrior or walking around with lions. But I'm still exploring. I'm still exploring different perspectives, different people. We're going to have to all find different ways to travel. We're going to have to find different places to go, different ways to do things. So embrace that. See the endless opportunity of that. The virus also brought a lot of sorrow, and some people lost people, some lost dignity, some lost freedom. But I want to encourage you all to go and explore in your own backyard. Start today and go just one neighborhood to your left or to your right. And go and explore other people, other people's stories. Go on safari in your own backyard.